Okay, so welcome back, everybody. So I'm here at Africa Energy Indaba, and the very interesting thing is one of the leading events into the continent. Why? Because we always come to see key players in the industry, and it's a chance for us just to find out a little bit more. So what I have for you today, it's a very interesting gentleman from Schneider Electric. Is Taru Mandagombe, who is a VP, the Vice President for Power and Grid for Middle East and Africa. So, but I won't tell you more about it for now because Taru is with me, sitting here with me, and then we're gonna go through a set of questions. So, Taru, I think a number of people following renewables in Africa will not know you, and the whole point is also to get them to get familiar with the great job you're doing, not only at Schneider but also before. So, if you can take maybe a minute or two just to properly introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. As you mentioned, Taru Mandagombe is my name. I've been involved in the power and energy space for the past almost 20 years, and I think all playing different roles within that sector. I mean, I started getting more involved on the end user side. I got involved on the management consulting side, the consulting space, the engineering and EPC, until I obviously moved up the value chain towards the technology provider, which is where I am when I joined Schneider 7 years ago. So the renewable energy space was the initial area of interest for me. I mean, I did a lot of studies and my master's in renewable energy, and that's somehow formed the basis and my baseline for my interest in the space. So I have really been actively involved in the power and energy spectrum for a while, not just in South Africa, but in the continent as a whole.
That's great because what it means that you have an all-round approach of the sector, so across the continent, which is good for comparison purposes. And it's even more important because today I want to talk to you about the topic of microgrid, which is something I think is dear to your heart. But why do you think it's important, microgrid? So what's the fuss about it?
Look, I think there's a couple of other reasons, right? I mean, where we are in a situation where we have now the number is actually gone up. We're actually more than almost 700 to 800 million people within the continent that don't have access to electricity. And one of the challenges that you get to hear from a lot of utilities or players in the industry is the fact that we don't have enough transmission grid capability to be able to provide electricity to those in the remote and rural areas, right? They will tell you it becomes less cost effective, to build those transmission distribution lines to connect to the low remote areas. And for that reason, we realize that we need some alternative solutions to help sure that we say provision of electricity should be a normal basic human right, and this is where we believe that everyone needs to have that access. And I think through microgrid systems, those are some of the solutions that we can incorporate to make sure that those in the rural areas, those that don't have access to basic lighting, can have that power in their houses. Now you will find that the trend is not only becoming much more important only for the remote areas, but in the cities it's grown up now, with a lot of load shedding that we have on the grid. We have a lot of power shortages across the continent. I know South Africa has experienced quite a bit in recent years, but across the continent, and I think to help gain that grid reliability and resilience, we need other alternative forms of power provision. And we believe that microgrids is the solution to try and curb these challenges we have on the electricity. But also in line with the COP27 resolutions that we need to start, drive sustainability, to try and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So from a microgrid perspective, especially if you are having renewable energy microgrid systems, it helps really in curbing down, the greenhouse gas emission impacts on the continent.
Excellent. You're talking about load shedding. Definitely, I know something about that because I arrived yesterday And definitely, I did experience it at night. So I was in the middle of doing something. All of a sudden, I said, "Oh yeah, load shedding. I'm back in South Africa." It's not to say that other countries are better, but it clearly puts you into the context immediately. So, talking about the microgrids, you made a very interesting point. Yeah. So the number of people without electricity actually is increasing. Despite all the effort that have been done, right? It shows that actually the population growth supersedes by far still basically the electrification rates, which is not good enough. If we're looking at the number of people on microgrids, yes, some progress has been made, but still very, very low compared to what is needed. So how do we scale it up? Because for that to be also be considered as a solution, as you said, so we need to find a way, or at least have a formula to scale them up to really tackle that problem. Otherwise, we're just going to be seeing that number increasing all the time.
No, absolutely, it's true. I think, look, it's a very fair point, because the idea is, as I've mentioned, that the microgrid sort of industry has been there for the past 30 years, but in as much as there's been some growth, we are not at the right levels where we should be, and there's been a number of impediments to that. I think from a commercial perspective, you understand that you need the investment to be able to put that capital cost outlay down there right from the beginning. You also need to make sure that your solution is quite bankable, and I think this is where we're having a lot of challenges around the bankability of projects. Private investors are finding it very difficult to get the right viable projects. And I was reading some stats a couple of weeks ago that almost only a third of all microgrid projects have gone through a bankability stage. So this is quite an alarming number, considering that we really need to have this done. And part of the reason is because, first of all, the bankability coming up being the main topic. Why are these projects not bankable? Because there is a lot of risk associated with some of the technologies that are being deployed. There's a less trust in terms of the durability from an operations and maintenance, and you will find that the private institutions or developer and funders would rather stick to the tried and tested international players, and thereby limiting room for the smaller localized developers in the countries and regions because of those stringent financial commercial requirements. So that's one thing, and this is where we're saying part of that is also because a lot of these solutions have not been thought through end to end. When you're developing this type of projects, you need to look at it from feasibility, through design, planning, and even on the operation and maintenance side. So we're looking at microgrids as a standalone system, right? But instead of incorporating other stages. Now, for that to happen, there has to be some evolution in terms of the software that we put on board in terms of this technology to make sure that it helps to make the systems much more robust, much more bankable and trustworthy, because you need data for you to be able to make your financial models as a bank, right? To understand how things will pan out. So that data, more data is being driven through software intervention to help the systems become much more bankable. But also another challenge is that you will find that in a lot of countries there's an element of reluctance from some utilities, obviously, to have microgrids deployed on the systems, because you find that a lot of utilities have spent a lot of capital to develop their infrastructure on the utility grid, on the main grid. So when you've developed all that infrastructure, why would you want to allow for other private players to come in and get involved in that place to steal some of your customers? If I may call it. But I'm saying it in that manner, in a nice way. But there's, in some areas, you will find that there's actually a lot of reluctance from the utilities to actually try and promote microgrids business, because it's seen as a competitor. So this is linked obviously to the policy makers and how these interventions are done in various countries. without understanding actually that this could be a solution for utilities to help them, bridge the connection. They talk about the last mile connections, right? And this is where utilities can help support driving, poverty, poverty alleviation, as well as making a social economic impact through those microgrid systems that they can deploy in their regions. We are seeing in countries in Chad, I've seen a lot of countries are deploying and utilities driving these microgrid systems to help curb that gap. But there's still reluctance in some other countries because they see that as a competitor. I think, in a nutshell, we need to have a more combined will from the political, from the utilities, from the private sector to try and look at this as a way of having a common goal towards, social and economic impact. And this is where we still see some of the struggles.
Yeah. I hear the point about better organizing the system, the technology that can use that. But I'm asking myself, are we not sort of going around the elephant in the room here, which is the fact that a lot of those projects, especially in the rural areas, will address, you talked about the last mile distribution. And what we know about that is, and this is a reality, and I know that talking to a number of players operating in this market, for example, for solar home system point of view, and have big issue with G4 rate. We can go from anything between 10% to 60%, I've seen. So, is the elephant in the room not the disposable income of the large majority of the potential customers? And if it's the case, how do we fix that to get microgrid to take off? I could be wrong, but I'm just asking a question because you're an expert. Look, all is more than me.
Look, my own personal, these are my own personal opinions around that. You need to have a bold drive from the government, right? I've seen it work in India, where they've really put in some bold incentive plans. The government is bringing some incentives to once again attract institutional investors to come in and deploy, because at the end of the day, if I'm an investor, I'm looking at my return on investment, ROI, right? And now if I am deploying this to the remote rural areas, for me it doesn't make money, right? I'm saying this assuming I'm an investor, but I'm not. So what then happens is, this is where the government comes in with some subsidies that they give to a lot of, and some tax rebates, whatever, to help those investors realize and ask a bit of ROE in terms of deployment. So it can't be one player, as I've mentioned, because investors, we also need to find a way to make it much more palatable for them.
Yeah.
And I think this is where incentive schemes and some rebates come into play. This is where also, you start looking at energy as a service.
Yeah.
Right? To look at, if I have to deploy a solution in this particular area, what other services can also come into full use and can benefit into that. So don't come in there as an investor coming in to provide power to this 300,000 people. Look at what other community-based sort of commercial activities can come out of there. If it's agriculture, this is where you start getting a lot of more sustained income, because I've seen it when we've done it in India. Like I said, they use this. It was initially deployed to support homes, right? Now, out of homes, this is a farming region, it's in a remote area. Now they started having irrigation pumps being driven, so there was generation of the economic activity in that area, and therefore that kind of helped in the long term to sustain the returns for the investors. So if you look at it in a holistic approach, I think it always helps to make sure that you don't look at on your ROE based on what you are currently deploying it, but also in terms of the future revenue that can be generated within that particular area.
Yeah, no, that's very key point. Let me just ask you a quick question that's based on what you said, which is very true. And I realize as other players, the key thing here is to have an approach whereby it's not just providing electricity to the people, but generate economic activity,
yes,
which ultimately lifts up the level of subsistence of these people who can then afford more, and because if they can afford more, they want more power, and they can contribute more, and so on and so forth. So that's captive power element. It's very important, and that's what many early programs were missing. Because if you're just purely only providing, let's say, electricity to replace a candle, yes, it's not going to go very far. Because as soon as those people, because we all go through, phases of like peak and trough, right? As soon as they go through a tough time, they stop paying for the power because they can afford to do it because they were living without power, so they can do that. But when you link it to an economic activity, which all of a sudden pulling out the family from where they were, that's I think it's more common than the question, but I guess that's something that from the example that you've seen, you were sort of illustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's fine. Excellent. I think I have a question with regard to Schneider, because you talked about the fact that you are coming in to help reinforce the model, bringing technology or processes. I'd like to hear more about that because I found it quite interesting, but you didn't sort of explain a little bit more. So I'd like to understand, because people will be asking, okay, what are they really doing in that microgrid? Are they selling the system? What are they selling? Selling is not a bad word, isn't it? But they would like to understand what is your actual contribution in this whole equation.
So we have been playing through various stages of the value chain in the microgrid business. I think from 10 years ago, if you look at these different models, of course, deployed in different regions based on what is economically viable and also the risk associated to that. I mean, a quick example is in the US, for instance, we've partnered with the Carlyle Group of private equity firm, and so we are offering the microgrid solution as an energy as a service, on an energy as a service perspective, right? So we do the whole financing, we do the technology provision, we will also do the maintenance and running of that. Typical example, if you look at the JFK International Airport, the whole Terminal 1, we're working on a project which is due for completion soon. And that project is about 12 megawatts, 12 megawatts of a microgrid solution which is supplying the whole of the terminal. And when there's load shedding, when there's no power, you can run 100% from the microgrid, so we can provide all the power required. In that particular project, right, we were working with the Carlyle Group from a funding and financing perspective. So we had the technology, which is our technology solution, which is mostly, we had to do the full equipment, medium voltage equipment to supply, the power. We also we have what we call the EcoStruxure grid, microgrid operator. So essentially, it's a software that is able to help you during the planning and design stages I was talking about earlier on, to make sure that you also have full visibility of what is happening on your microgrid, and in there you are able to actually model and be able to see even in terms of future power requirements because of data. I think in this day of data, this is where you actually need to do a lot more to make sure that at least you have a much more viable solution. So we're incorporating the software to manage and run the whole microgrid efficiently. And efficiently, I'm saying that you want to make sure that you're deploying the power at the right time when it's not necessary, and if it's during the day, you're taking advantage of your solar farms and not, because it's a combination of your battery system, combination of your solar panels and some fuel cells. So you want to make sure that you're increasing efficiencies where you don't need to put on the battery when it's not necessary, when you still have enough light. So you are literally running at full optimum 100% scale. So we've been deploying a lot of the systems, even in Africa. In Chad, we built 4 megawatts, total of 4 megawatt microgrid systems for the different cities, 3 different cities in Chad.
Interesting.
Where we're saving almost 300,000 people. And this is in the urban areas, right? This is no longer in the remote rural side. So we the full system from the grid, the technology, from the medium voltage, the whole software, and just the whole grid balancing aspect is done through our solution. So we have an end-to-end approach when it comes to microgrid solution, off-grid, grid connect, and completely added solutions. So
that's very interesting. And look, and what the range we're talking about here, because you talked about JFK 12 megawatt, Chart 4 megawatt.
Yeah.
What is the lowest you can do?
Look, we can do as low. I mean, we've done some 68 kilowatt systems.
Okay.
Right. So we are very much looking. I mean, we're currently deploying a small system, which is called the Homaya system, which can go up to about 3 kilowatts, which is actually which has done quite a lot of volume within Southern Africa. We've sold quite a lot of those, especially around these load shedding times, right? So we have those 3 kilowatt systems, 1.5 kilowatt systems that we can share, you know, which is enough for you to power your fridge, your TV, your Wi-Fi, and so forth, right? And then we can scale it up right all the way to, like I said, JFK. We've done almost 12 megawatts. So we are very scalable from residential household right all the way to commercial supply, commercial requirements.
Okay, and you say that, and what's the autonomy of those microgrid systems? So the autonomy.
Yeah. So, like I said to you, JFK, for instance, 100%. You can operate 100% when there's no load.
Okay. So that means there must be an element of batteries.
There is battery storage, and so we will combine it obviously with some batteries. And we as Schneider, we have a relationship with some battery manufacturers. I mean, we do not manufacture batteries, so we have a good relationship with a lot of battery manufacturers. So in those type of projects, we will.
Are those microgrids fully renewables, or there's an element of fossil fuel, for example, a bit of gas or?
The one in JFK is fully renewable.
Okay.
Fuel cell, which is more on the gas side. I mean, this is what we've done there.
Okay.
We've done some in Africa where we've had to strike the balance between solar and some diesel.
Yeah.
But obviously the idea is with time we need to try and make sure that because at some point in time, yes, you have the battery, yes, you've got the solar, but you also need something as well as a backup. So I think hybrid is always a safer solution from a reliability and sustainability perspective. Nonetheless, it doesn't mean that I'm saying we can't deploy 100% renewable energy. We've seen it work now at the JFK. So, which is
it's very interesting. I think my last question for you, I think, what is your? Because I think everybody talk about 2030, right? So 2030 we need to be 100%, electrified in Africa. Let's be honest, it's not going to happen at the pace we're going. But where are we going to be from microgrid perspective for 2030? So what do you see? So compared to where we are right now, are we going to have 3 times more microgrids, 2 times? What is your projection?
Look, I think my current projection, when 5 years ago, I remember when I was going through some reports from, I think it was PwC report. It was mentioning that we had grown between 2013 and about 2017. In those past 5 years, we grew almost 300%, right? From a microgrid perspective. Now, when I look at where we are, just to give you an example of what has transpired in South Africa, for instance, a lot of the regulations are starting to become much more favorable for microgrid system. First of all, the presidents announced last year that they were they're lifting the limits, in terms of how much you can. So all that is creating now a much more conducive environment for a lot of players to get involved. Yes, there's still other challenges that still need to be traded through, but at least that's the beginning. So for me, there's a lot of drive now, customer awareness around what is actually happening in the microgrid space. I mean, when I deployed my system not so long ago in my house, I had about 10 friends
asking,
right? Already, they are all, I mean, think about it. I've managed to impact 10 people around me. These are just my friends. Now I can imagine people in general. So when I look at these projections, really, to be honest, I think in the next 5 years or in the next, it's going to be in tenfold. We're going to grow at least 10 times in terms of where we are now. There is an opportunity as long as we have the right deployment mechanism, we integrate the right solutions, and we're also making sure that we are still getting that support from the policymakers to keep this market quite more conducive.
No, that's fine. Yeah. I said that was the last question. I think I lied.
Yeah.
That's the very last question. Because I clearly can see that you are a strong supporter of at least the green economy, renewables energy, alongside other sources as well that Africa needs. That's also true. So I am. And you and I are two professionals in the sector. I have a question that I sometimes get from young people.
Yeah.
And you and I, I'm sure we want to get them a little more into it.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I want a frank answer. Can we make money with microgrids? So if they are interested, because you're saying that microgrids, Africa needs it, is good for us, no problem. We want to attract more people coming into the market. But it's also about for them making a good life for themselves, but also their family.
Yeah.
And most of the time they go to other sectors, like I usually say to people don't go to oil and gas because they love oil and gas. It's all dirty, right? It's because they see that they can make a good living. Or if we are to compete, because we have to compete, even if it's like a fair competition, like I say, healthy, we need to also show that there is money there. So the question is, can they make money working microgrid?
You're putting me on the spot here, buddy. Look, obviously, we will, first of all, as Schneider, we understand that, at the end of the day, I think the fundamentals that drive us is access to energy is a fundamental right for each and every human being. So, on that basis, making money, how much money is enough money? I mean, I think a return, when it comes to access to energy topics, I think the priority there is enhancements of the social economic aspect of people, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you come in and say you want to get into the microgrid business to make money, I'm not saying you can't, you can. In fact, there's more people that are making money in this space, right? Of course, like you say, it depends on who your off-takers are when it comes. That's the critical part. Is if I got an off-take agreement with a Sasol, with an Anglo, with a big, large energy engine, it's not the same, right? But if I want to go and invest in a microgrid in the remote rural areas of Mpumalanga, and I deploy there and offer energy as a service, it's also quite relative, right? It's not comparable. So depending on which area and which space you are in, I'm not saying you can't make returns in deploying a microgrid as an entrepreneur in the remote areas, especially if you compare, the whole discussion we had about enhancement of the productive energy as a productive use in the region. You can, but it's a balance. It's a fine balance between the socio-economic aspect as well as really making a lot of money. Yes, you get a good contract, good off-taker with a specific well-renowned manufacturer, you can.
Okay, that's good. That's a great answer. So that means you have to balance it. So Taru, that was excellent. Thank you very much for your time for this conversation. I think I've learned a lot. I'm actually quite optimistic about the trajectory for microgrid, and I wasn't aware of how, let's say, how important your solutions for microgrid were. Like I say, it's very, very important. That's why it's good to have those conversations. Going from Chad all the way to JFK, clearly there's something to be looked at there. So thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a good rest of the conference. Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Tony.
Excellent.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool.